Brittney was a very lovey, affectionate kid. And one thing that we started to notice is that she wanted nothing to do with me, which hurt really bad. And I just, in the height of everything going on, she was always picking my husband, which nothing against my husband, but I'm a mom. And I was like, I just want to hold you. I just want to sit in the wheelchair with you.
Just because maybe she looked at her father as being her, her strong protector is all.
Yeah.
And
and that's what it was, is he was like, he loved it. But we started noticing a trend throughout her journey is that when Brittney wasn't feeling well, she clung to him and would like shut me out, which hurt really bad. And it wasn't, it's just a kid being a kid. But then when she felt good, she would cling to me and shut him out. So we would go through this cycle of just, each one of us, we're like, we just want to love you and we just want to hold you. And she's like, I want nothing to do with you. So we went home. The car ride home, we got a phone call that her PET CT showed that her cancer was localized to one area. So we're like, okay, great. Like, here's some good news. Things are okay. We're wrapping our head around this. When we were in Boston, the plan's going to be chemo and proton radiation. Surgery was never an option, which most cancers, they want to try to remove surgically to give you the best.
So they were looking at chemo not even to just shrink it, just they thought it would kill it with no removal.
They were like, they wanted to do chemo to shrink it, and then proton radiation would be like the next thing to kind of get rid of it. Surgery wasn't an option because of the location, the nerves, the vessels, and just even accessing the area. So they said surgery is not an option. We also weren't really provided with like, do you want a second opinion? And it didn't even necessarily cross my mind because I'm at Boston Children's Hospital, world renowned. So the only thing that we really asked was like, we live 2 hours away. Brittney had been experiencing car sickness for like a year or two prior to this, which maybe in hindsight was the tumor growing and affecting her equilibrium. So we said, can we do chemo back home at our local hospital? Like, chemo's chemo, right? Like, yeah, absolutely. Like, you can do chemo back home. So we thought that there was like this plan of like working together to stay home. And so Brittney could be home after treatments, like just some normalcy to her life and not, after living in a hospital for about a week. So we get home and then they're like, come back for surgery on Monday with her port. We'll try to clean up her ear. And so we go back. Nobody had told us like we had to get a COVID test ahead of surgery. So we show up on surgery day and they're like, you didn't show up for your COVID test. And like, nobody told us. So then they're like, well, we got to see if we can do the surgeries now because we're going to have to change over everything in between. And we're like, and then we had her ear the night before just got like, we woke up and it looked like something had been like murdered in our bed, just so much blood from her ear that was still bleeding after the biopsy. And I don't know if like she had scratched it in the middle of the night or anything, but like we woke up, there's just blood everywhere. So we got a new ENT doctor at Boston Children's, and this guy was phenomenal.
So finally a good one.
Amazing ENT doctor who came in and he was like military experience or something. So he's like, I'm so sorry. He's like, that should not be happening. We're like, thank you. Like, this is what we've been saying. So he's like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to try to clean it out more. And then he's like, I can do this gel thing. And we're like, and then he was the one that later on also discovered her vocal cord like half paralysis and things. Like, nobody noticed that. We had kept saying like we can barely hear her. Her voice is so raspy. So thankfully we had like a good ENT doctor, and like her ear never bled after that, which was fantastic. So we did all of that, and then we headed back home again to start her chemo closer to home.
Can I ask a stupid question? Why couldn't you get the port somewhere closer?
I don't know. And it wasn't something, I guess I felt comfortable with them doing it out in Boston and just be like, already that was the plan. And I think as we get into the story, you'll learn that things don't always get communicated, and we just did it with them because it was like they scheduled it and we're like, okay, we'll just go with it. Again, like, I guess trusting the process.
And you're not probably thinking like common sense is out the window usually in these moments, and you're just like, all right, they said here, we go here, and it becomes just running.
Yeah. Again, like, I have some medical knowledge background working in MRI. I could understand what they were saying. I was grasping everything. I'm like, this makes sense to me. Prior to having Brittney, like, my mom had gone through cancer and did a lot of appointments with her and things. So I'm like, okay, I have my wits about me. And again, I'm trusting in a world-renowned hospital and what their doctors are saying. And I'm like, hey, I just want to do chemo closer to home so that at the end of the day, we can go home and be in our own bed when she feels like shit. little did I know that I wish that they had been a little bit more proactive in offering suggestions. So, like I said, we weren't asked if we wanted a second opinion.
I don't
Similar.
know if doctors or hospitals ever suggest that.
I don't think that they do.
I mean, it would put them out of business. It's the patient's point to get a second opinion because it will take you to different hospitals, different doctors, different.
And the thing with second opinions is they're not like, it can delay.
Yeah, you could be months.
Yeah, like you have to, find where to go. And then, like, everyone, obviously, as we're going through this, everyone's like, oh, have you reached out to St. Jude's? And it's like, well, no, because I know, like, they're telling us we need to start treatment right away. We can't prolong waiting to start treatment. And again, this is Boston Children's. Okay, why would I need to go to Tennessee when I've got this right here in my backyard? But the thing that I felt looking back in hindsight was a disservice, because later on in Brittney's journey, we actually ended up at Connecticut Children's, which is about 45 minutes from our house. I wish that if they had said, like, we understand if you want to be closer to home, yes, you can do your chemo at Bay State, but there's actually a sarcoma specialist in Connecticut, which is 45 minutes from your house, which is only another 25 minutes from Bay State Hospital. That maybe if being closer to home is for you and that's what you want to do, there is a sarcoma specialist in Connecticut.
Does that come up on Google searching ever either, like specialists in that field, or you weren't thinking?
I wasn't thinking. I just was like, okay, here's a sarcoma specialist at Boston Children's.
You can never fault yourself because you just want someone to give you all the answers, but also they're giving you timelines that are like right this moment, not in like 2 days from now.
Yeah. And they're only giving you answers to the questions you ask. They're not, you have to learn to like ask outside of what
the wild, ridiculous questions you have to just ask.
Yeah. Because if I had known that, like, I'm not saying that it would have changed the outcome for Brittney.
Quality of time would be different.
Yes. Yep. The whole experience probably would have been completely different.
Unfortunately, you can't let that be what you hold on to forever. I mean, the reality is you did everything as parents would do in the moment. And that's just the truth. You didn't just give up. You tried everything that you could, that you were given information. It's also COVID sucked. Let's just get serious. That changed people's perspective, perception, and just reality of like what was going on. Hospitals are already like a non-fun zone, we'll call them. And now everyone walking around in masks, even like random people just coming in for deliveries are wearing, like, it just made it like these like war zone vibes that were just uncalled for. So you're put in a situation psychologically that you can't think this way. So they're giving at you left, right, this way. And you and your husband are like, all right, we're just going to do and try to make Brittney get better now. And you can't fault yourself for that.
No, it's just, but it
sucks is what it is.
It sucks. And it's one of those things that goes through your head when you're living this life of like, what could I have done different? What did I do wrong? What if I did this? What if I did that? Like, it's just inevitable. It's inevitable because you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and you're making decisions with like little to no information and little to no guidance, because they don't, ultimately the decision is yours, right? And so it's hard because you're just like
your child on the line,
flipping a coin, because what I've seen in this world is that two kids can be on the exact same protocol and one survives and one doesn't. And there's really like nothing besides their own internal like genes. And
no, it's, you guys definitely had hiccup after hiccup.
I won't say never. We got good news when Brittney her blood clots dissolved and we were able to come off the blood thinners, but we felt like every time we had like scans, it was never like good news. We just felt like we couldn't get a footing, and that it was just like one thing after another. And like when Brittney started her chemo, we were inpatient at the hospital because they don't know how they're going to react as far as allergic reactions and things like that. I remember, again, only one of us could stay there. So my husband gets gets us all settled, and Brittney had been like craving Cheetos.
Yes,
And again, you're
yes.
like, whatever they want to eat. And that's what they tell you too. They're like, calories are calories. Just let them eat whatever they want to
If
eat.
they want to rob a bank, they're allowed to.
So she had eaten like a whole bag of Cheetos, getting ready for bed. She's starting to get angry because, again, like poked, prodded, touched, no voice of her own. And I just remember her hitting me and then proceeding to vomit all over me and her, as I'm just like, this sucks. This is so unfair for her to go through this. And in that stay, it was one of the first times Brittney ever rode a tricycle, was in the halls of the hospital. One of the videos I sent you is her riding a tricycle for the first time with a mask on, and my husband and I pushing an IV pole behind her at 4 years old.
It's those surreal moments, though. She at least was probably having a ball.
Oh yeah, she was pretending that there was like ducks in the hallway, and she was like, "We have to stop. The ducks are crossing," and you can barely hear her because her voice was so raspy from the paralysis. But she was making the best of it. We were probably suffering more as her parents, witnessing like this is not how this should be. Like for her at that age, they kept telling us like kids adapt, and I'm like, I don't know how.
Don't know the true meaning of life yet. Like
Yeah,
they're not paying bills.
and I'm like, what do you mean they adapt? Like she's getting shots and all this stuff, and she did. These kids, it becomes like they're normal, and it's incredible their resiliency. And I think, like you said, like they just don't know, but it's incredible to see what they adapt to be asked to do, and things like that, and they don't have really a choice or a voice. It truly is inspiring.
Yeah. I mean, we used to do kids' days in hospitals before COVID, and we'd set it up because I had a fashion line so the kids could have hats because they go bald. So
Yep.
I figured in bullying, and we'd paint T-shirts and hats. And I did it solely for the fact that I wanted to give them back their voice because cancer is so ugly and people bully. Kids also are mean.
Oh yeah.
Kids are mean. And, when they're outside of the hospital, they get bullied. But I just remember like these kids, and it ranged from like, I think I met with like a 5-year-old all the way up to like there was like a 20-year-old girl. But they all had a gift of life that I don't think I ever had. They would go through the pain and the ups and downs of like the treatments and the poking and the prodding, but the second that was done, happy-go-lucky again. And they were asking millions of questions and just watching TV and drawing, and I was like, how do they do that? It's like, again, it's always like the beauty and the darkness. You can only see beauty because of the darkness, or else you wouldn't know what to look for. So there's something just so powerful with these kids. It always left me speechless. She has those moments. Those are beautiful memories that you will always have, and
Yeah.
she had a blast doing it. Trust everyone, she did. And and you're a mom, so it's going to hit you very differently than it will hit her father or her sister or a relative. So it's allowed.
Yeah.
You gotta have fun with those fun moments. I mean, those stories.
Yeah. Well, like you said, she, at 4, she was asking questions. Like we would be going in, and she's like, what's going to happen to me today? What do I need to do? And then she'd be like, okay, that's not so bad. Like she wanted to be prepared at 4 years old, and like, and then, we would get home from treatment, and when she didn't feel like shit, she's like, I want to go do something fun, or I want to have fun today. I want to do something today, which was just incredible too. Cause you're like, okay. But it got to the point, like she was advocating for herself. Like, so a port, that they put under the skin. And so for kids, they try to numb it. I'm sure they do for adults. They put like numbing cream on it, and it has to sit for like 30 minutes. That gave her so much anxiety, knowing like she knew what that cream meant, and it would give her anxiety. And she's like, I don't want it on. And we would, be struggling. And so thankfully one of the nurses was like, well, we could try this like freezy spray, kind of like a biofreeze, where you spray it and then you access the port. And if people don't know, it's a long needle that goes into the port. And so they were like, Brittney, do you want to do that? And she was like, yeah. And so she was like, the cream would give her so much anxiety. So she's like, do the freezy spray and then access my port. And like, we're like, okay, like that's what she wants. There was another instance when we got to radiation. Radiation involves sedation every time for these kids because you can't move. It's so precise. They have these masks that are melded to their faces and strapped to a table. So they sedate these kids. And Brittney went through 30 rounds of being sedated every time. And she in the beginning, she was like, I don't like the buzzing behind my eye. And I was like, what are you talking about? Buzzing. So we brought it up to the nurse and they're like, oh yeah, like with the, I forget the medicine at the time, but they're like, yeah, the way that they put it in, they do it really slow. And so they're like, it must be when it's going really slow. So like we can ask them to do it faster. And I said, okay, like she doesn't like it. So sure. So the nurse talked to the doctor and at first they're like, no. And they're like, no, she's telling you at 4 years old that she doesn't like this. Can we do it faster? And finally, they're like, okay.
And it worked.
Yeah. Like she hated it. Like, you know, what kid wants to be sedated every time?
Yeah.
But she would rather be fast than deal. She's like, I don't like the buzzing.
She's like, let's just get this over with. Like,
Yeah.
stop playing the games.
Yeah. So like 4 years old, she was already saying like, this is stuff I don't like.
That's pretty special, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sad, but it's sadder when it's just, again, I always say, you know, for like, I watch my mom and like, you know, you always hear all the what everyone else speaks and everyone's like, well, you know, at least it's like she's doing this and it's because, you know, but if it was her kid, it would have killed her. And I was like, that they're like, no parent should ever have to bury their child. That's like the golden rule of life, you know. So it's like, and so she had to bury, you know, she buried, you know, we buried her husband and her daughter before she passed away. So like, it's I got to see everything in life too quick. But yeah. So it's you're going, you know. So it's always those moments. You got to remember the fun ones.
Yeah. It's hard because it's also tainted with those being in the hospital, right? Like it's just like when she should have just been a child enjoying her childhood. We thought throughout the whole thing, this is just going to be a chapter of her story. You know,
and are they saying that during it? Like, are the doctors and nurses just all, are they reinforcing, like, everything's going well, chemo did well, like, radiation going well? Are they giving you step-by-steps and, like you're like, okay, the progress is going well? Because now she's, how many treatments, like, how long was chemo before radiation? They didn't do it at the same time, did they?
No, so we were set up, we were given a plan. I'm an information person. I am a planner, think of every possible scenario. So I was like, what are we looking at? Like, what stage is this? What's the survival rate? Like, again, my mom had gone through a different type of cancer. So they're like, oh, it's like 70%. But they're like, your kid's not a number. Like, your kid's your kid. And I'm like, I get that, but I need to process and comprehend what this means. And so I'm like, okay, 70%. Again, it's in one location. It's like it's like intermediate risk. We're not like stage 4. So like, we're going to do a couple rounds of chemo. And the idea was to shrink the tumor. So that way, then when we went to radiation, which we were still doing chemo, but they had to take one chemo away because of the toxicity with the radiation, that the tumor would be smaller. So it's just a smaller area to radiate. And then we would continue back on chemo. So they said, you're looking at a good year of chemo and radiation. We're looking at, this was like May, they're like March, barring any like missing counts, blood transfusion, you know, things like that. So we did a couple rounds of chemo before we did end up moving to Boston for 6 weeks for proton radiation at Mass General Hospital. So now we've got a third hospital in the mix.
Yeah, you do, don't you? Wow.
Yeah. Just because they are one of the few that has a proton radiation machine. So there's proton radiation, which is like, it's like a pencil beam and it can go in and it really just hits the tumor, and they try to minimize exposure to normal healthy tissue, but there is like a radius around it. So there's, you know, they're like, just so you know, like there could be impacts to her temporal lobe of her brain in terms of memory and slower processing, and she's gonna lose her hearing in her right ear. They're like, these are all the things. But by the time we got to starting radiation, after the few rounds of chemo, the radiation specialist was surprised that the tumor hadn't shrunk. So they were like, so that we learned that was like in August. And they were like, so the tumor hasn't really responded to the chemo as we had hoped. So we're like, okay. Like, I didn't take it as bad news. I was just like, okay. So they said, basically, we just have to rethink our radiation plan. And so we're like, okay. So at this point, Brittney still has the facial drooping, the raspy vocal cord. And so we start radiation. And actually within 2 weeks, we started seeing the improvement in her face. when she was smiling, it was symmetric. So we're like, okay, radiation is what's really working here. Yeah, we finished radiation and we're still on chemo, and we thought things were like moving in the right direction. We're like, okay, like we're starting to see this visual response.
So your thing, are you also speaking with the doctors? Are they reassuring this, or is it just you guys seeing her
So
having?
they were seeing it too, but they're like, basically, so with radiation, the only way that you can check it is scans afterwards. Initially, after radiation finishes, there's an initial like swelling period and things like that. So what they'll do is after radiation, they do a 3-month scan to see where things are, and then it's like 6 months and then 12 months. So her last imaging had been right before radiation to double check and see where the tumor was and the size, so they could do all of their planning. So visually, she was looking better. She never needed a blood transfusion. She had 1 episode of missing counts for her white blood cells being too low to do chemo, which they're like, that's okay. Like,
Advise them sometimes. So
yeah. So otherwise, like, we felt like things were progressing in the right direction. We're like, okay, like, again. So back to your question, like, they weren't giving us, I don't think any doctor is going to be like, oh yeah, like, they don't want to give you false hope. But, it was just a matter of like, in my mind, I was like, this is a chapter of her story. We're going through, we're doing everything. We're at top hospitals, Boston Children's, Mass General. Like, this is part of her story. This is just part of her story. So finished radiation in like September, came back home. We continued on chemo. And then we went in the beginning of December for a routine scan to check after radiation. I remember it being on a Thursday because they can only scan kids on Thursday at the hospital near us. This was the first time we were doing an image back at our hospital. We had always gone back out to Boston. And my husband was like, let's just do it here. And I'm like, okay. So we go in on a Thursday and we didn't hear anything. The weekend goes by. I'm starting to get anxious. Finally, we get a phone call asking my husband and I to come in on a Tuesday.
now to this hospital, you had to drive all the way to your doctor.
To our local hospital, to the oncologist that we had been working with, like for her chemo and stuff. And he's asking us to come in. And I was so anxious. I'm like, I don't. So we went in and they bring us into a room and he comes in with a box of tissues. And he's like, her cancer has spread. And I was so dumbfounded. And they were like, it's spread to like her meninges of her brain. And like, so I'm like, what are you saying? And he is like, well, I need you to talk to the doctor in Boston. You have to talk to the Boston sarcoma specialist. We sent the images to them to double check. That's why it took so long. And basically they're like, there's nothing, like, you need to talk to them. So I remember just probably sitting there. I think I just like screaming, like just crying out, like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this can't be happening. Like, what are you talking about? Like, he's on treatment. Like, we're on active treatment. How? So it was a Tuesday. My husband and I went back to get Brittney. She was staying with my in-laws. We're being told like her cancer spread. Like, we have to wait and talk to this other doctor.
Does she know yet?
No. And finally, so I like call that doctor's office. I'm like, when can we talk to this doctor? Like, we need to know. And again, I start Googling, and I know it's the worst thing for you, but like, again, I need to prepare myself. And what I was finding was not good. And my husband's like, don't jump to conclusions. So finally we get told we'll meet with that doctor on Friday via Zoom. Meanwhile, Brittney does end up in the ER because she's like complaining of pain. And so they were like, is there pressure in the head? It ended up being like nothing. We ended up meeting with that doctor. So we're on the Zoom with the sarcoma specialist at Boston Children's Hospital. And we're being told that Brittney's cancer has spread. And it is what is called leptomeningeal disease. And this can happen with any cancer. It spreads to the meninges around the brain and enters into the cerebral spinal fluid. And when this happens, there is no treatment proven, and this is a terminal diagnosis. And we have 4 to 6 months left of her.
And it's just you and your husband right now?
It's me and my husband on a Zoom. And so we're like, well, like, is there anything anything that we can do? And they're like, well, we could try this different chemo. Again, like at this point, there's nothing proven. They're like, well, if you were here, we could try this. We're like, okay, like we'll come there. We're 2 hours away. Like we'll get in the car and drive there. And this doctor said to us, no, I'm going on vacation. So
I'm sorry.
and right there, I was like, I was in so much shock. I wish that I had been like, what? Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, there's not another doctor that can administer this medication. But I was in shock. And at that point, I was
going on vacation.
Yeah. No, it said, I'm going, and again, mind you, we are about 2 weeks away from Christmas. So you're telling me that my daughter has now 4 to 6 months to live, and that there is something we could try if we were in Boston, but you're going on vacation. So, no.
You guys are a lot nicer than I would be. Are there, is he not like, hey, my other doctor who's, subbing in for me while I'm away can do it? Like, no other person could do it but him and his vacation time?
We were able to, in the end, another fun thing that we discovered is certain hospitals can administer certain things without prior authorizations, and then different hospitals need prior authorizations to administer different things. So apparently,
if you're in them and you're in rotation, they could just do it and later get it, but coming in is a different story.
So we were able to eventually start this medication back at our hospital after a prior authorization.
Like by the time you got in your car and got there, they would know that day.
Yeah, I just think that this doctor had written us off at that point because she was terminal, and in their experience they were looking at it like,
yeah, it doesn't matter, you fight till
so we did. So I was like, so basically it confirmed what I had found online was leptomeningeal disease, and I hate using this word, but it is extremely rare, and that's why there is no known treatment, because the amount of people that get it is very low, and so they can't do clinical trials on it, and then the survival rate is 4 to 6 months.
Is there a point in when Brittney was doing chemo and radiation for the long word I can't pronounce, that cancer, was it part of like the contributing factor to this cancer, or is it completely separate and it's just her body was weak and cancer was growing?
So that's kind of probably the $1 million question there, because her tumor location was parameningeal, so outside the meninges. So it's a question of, had it already started to touch the meninges when it was first found and it just wasn't showing on imaging? Did we aggravate something with the chemo or the radiation that caused it to breach that barrier? Those are like the $1 million questions that I don't think no one would ever even know unless it was missed on like initial imaging.
It doesn't sound like if they could have seen it, they couldn't have. It sounds like it's a very specific location that just, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And you know how scans go.
And it just meant like,
but you can't see everything. It's
and it just makes me wonder. Like, one of the things that I questioned, like, what if we had done radiation first? Like, what if it responded to radiation? So, like, what if we had done that first? But then, when you're talking about kids Brittney's age, 3 to 4 years old, they try to hold off on radiation because of the impacts to the brain, and so it's like you're just in this like endless cycle of like
just praying.
Yeah, and again being like a rock in a hard place of like, okay, so we get told like she needs to have a full spine MRI because they need to see if it's in her cerebral spinal fluid, and a lumbar puncture. And again, they're telling us this 2 weeks before Christmas, and they're like, but the schedule's like packed, and we can't get her in until like the end of December, and we can't start treatment until we do this imaging. So that did not sit well with me, because again, you're telling me my child is terminal. We have been very reserved with sharing Brittney's journey on social media. We started a Caring Bridge page, which is like kind of like a blog that you can set up, and then the people that want to know can go find it. We didn't share a lot of stuff on like our Facebook and Instagram out of respect for Brittney, again thinking like, would she want this out there when she got older? And so we did kind of reserve a lot of that and kind of kept it very close to the vest. At this point, I was like, Hail Marys. I was like, this is fucked. I'm not waiting till the end of the month to find out what we can do. And so I went on social media, and having worked in MRI, and it just took off from there. And finally we get a phone call and they're like, okay, we're going to get you guys in like next week. I'm like, thank you. And so then it also took off with, once I was done with Boston Children's, I was like, fuck this. I'm done. I went on, and again, I was like, with our local doctor too, though, he was like, okay, I'll help you. Cause I was like, there's gotta be something. Like I'm reaching out to other specialists. Like we finally reached out to St. Jude's at this point, Sloan Kettering, CHOP, MD Anderson, City of Hope out in like California, Pittsburgh Children, Yale, New Haven. And we were just like, we were throwing everything. Like, there's got to be something. There's got to be a clinical trial. There's got to be somebody that can give us hope, right? And so again, thank heavens for social media. We started getting a lot of connections, and ultimately ended up with Connecticut Children's, with a sarcoma specialist there, who was like, come see me. Let me hear about Brittney and your story. Took over an hour out of his day. We weren't a patient there, and was like, there's not a lot of options. The chances are slim. I have had one patient with something similar that did survive, so I'm willing to do this with you. I'm willing to give you that hope, which was what we needed. So he was like, we're gonna try this this new chemo. It's ifosfamide and doxorubicin, which is called the Red Devil.
Yep.
He's like, we're just gonna, these are ones she hadn't had before. So he was like, but you can do it at your local hospital, because we weren't officially a patient of his yet. But he's like, I'll be like consulting on it.
He sounds like a doctor so far.
Yeah. So we said, okay. So we go back to our doctor. Our doctor was amazed at like all the contacts I was making, all the things like it was and I'm like, but like I'm also like trying to care for my child. Like I'm taking away precious time from my child trying to find all these resources, and it's like, this should not be that difficult for parents.
No, it shouldn't.